Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So for today's video we are doing coffee with Molly. I've forgotten what episode we're on, so yeah, we're just gonna be doing coffee with Molly, and this is actually a Starbucks drink. I saved a bit so I could share it with you guys. But first, if you could smash me a big thumbs up down below and subscribe to my YouTube channel, I will forever be grateful. Also, if you could go over to my Instagram and my Twitter and my Facebook, I mean, that would be pretty dope too, but it doesn't matter if not. Just make sure you like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. So we haven't done a coffee with Molly in a good few weeks, so I wanted to do something that I have noticed about people that don't have ADHD. They assume so many things about people with ADHD, and I want to set them straight. So for today's kind of topic, we are going to be discussing what you should not assume about someone with ADHD. But first, I'm gonna have a bit of coffee. Like, come on, let's get going on to coffee with Molly. So ADHD on its own comes with a whole variety of like stigmas. Basically none of them are true. Like, all of them are taken way out of context. Like, you can't always focus. We can focus, but sometimes we focus on too many things and it's hard for us to stay focused on one thing. There's nothing that comes from fact or truth, like, oh, it doesn't exist, but how come there's doctors, how come there is a diagnosis, how come there's medication for ADHD? So some of the stigmas are just absolutely stupid, but what I hate the most is that people assume everyone with ADHD, they're going to have the same traits and the same kind of symptoms, the same impact on a person. But really, ADHD is literally as unique as it could come. You know, everyone with ADHD has their own version of ADHD. No one is the same.
No.
Everyone has their own unique version of ADHD, so people need to stop assuming that everyone is going to have the same traits. ADHD looks different on me than it does to you if you have ADHD. We aren't going to be the same. What you struggle with, I might not. What I struggle with, you probably don't. So ADHD is a unique diagnosis. There's a diagnosis kind of criteria, but that's just a basic. That doesn't even mention, you know, emotional dysregulation or, you know, rejection sensitivity. And we know as ADHDers, that is a huge part of our ADHD. So, you know, the diagnosis kind of criteria, it's kind of 1940s. It's not up to date. So, of course, everyone's ADHD is going to be a little bit kind of based around the naughty schoolboy era, that people just believe that everyone with ADHD is going to be naughty or that they're going to end up in prison. But the thing is, people don't realise that all of that is a load of beep, beep, beep. So I'm going to do my best today to kind of tell you what you shouldn't assume. But the thing is, if a child with ADHD has bad behaviour, there's a reason behind that. It's not because, oh, because they have ADHD, of course they're going to be naughty or they're going to be bad behaved. They're a child. Every child tries to push boundaries. You know, don't just assume because a child has bad behaviour that they have ADHD. It's so wrong. So yeah, I wanted to make sure today that I got all the things across that I wanted to. So I come up with, like, on my like Apple Notes on my iPad, I wrote down the things that I have been assumed. You know, I've had people assume about me and my ADHD, so this is my experiences with assumptions. So what you should do for me, guys, is let me know down below in the comments what you have had said about you and what assumptions you've had against you and your ADHD. So you shouldn't assume that everyone with ADHD is gonna be hyperactive. You should never assume that, because not everyone with ADHD is going to be hyperactive. And also, hyperactivity isn't just about someone bouncing off the walls and having like loads and loads of energy. Hyperactivity comes in many forms. Hypersexuality, hyposexuality, hypersensitivity, hyperreactivity. You know, there's so many things that come with hyperactivity that you guys just don't know if you don't have ADHD, and I am trying to educate you, so make sure you are listening, because honestly it's so important that you know the difference between hyperactivity and hypersensitivity, hyper-rejection sensitivity. There's so many things. So yeah, don't just assume everyone's going to be hyperactive in the most stereotyped way, because it doesn't happen like that. So another one is, you should never assume that everyone with ADHD needs medication or takes medication. So medication is definitely a personal preference when it comes to ADHD. I personally take medication. I personally take Elvance. It is a stimulant medication. That is my own choice. I've done my own research. I, done a pro and cons list of my own. It is my personal choice. Not everybody with ADHD needs medication. They can cope without medication. That doesn't mean they are stronger than somebody who chooses to take medication. It just means, people with ADHD that need the medication, they just need a little bit extra support. That doesn't mean they are weaker. So yeah, medication is a personal preference. So don't assume that if you don't take meds, your ADHD isn't that bad, and don't assume that if you take meds, you're weak. Yeah, so basically, don't assume that everyone is gonna take medication, or because it's just wrong, because it's not true. People have reasons why they can't or why they don't want to. So yeah, medication is a personal preference. Don't assume everyone is going to choose to take medication. So the next one is, don't assume that everyone with ADHD is going to have behavioural challenges. So for me, like I've said multiple times, school was a challenging time for me. So my behaviour was seen as naughty and challenging, and my behaviour in college was very challenging. So yeah, for me personally, behaviour was an issue. But I also know other people that have ADHD despite their gender. They don't have problems with authority, they don't have problems with rules, they don't have problems kind of sticking to rules and routines, and their behaviour is, a perfect student. So yeah, don't assume that everyone with ADHD is going to be naughty, because it just doesn't happen like that, and that is a really dangerous assumption to make. So that is why a lot of people go misdiagnosed, because people just stick to the stereotyped versions of ADHD, and that isn't the case. There isn't just one type of ADHD. ADHD, like I said, is unique to the person. So it's really dangerous to assume anything, but especially everyone is going to have the same kind of behaviour challenges. It doesn't work like that. It would be easy if it did, but it's not. Everyone has an individual kind of challenge. Everyone is impacted differently when it comes to ADHD. So just remember that. So the next one, again, is kind of along the same lines as the previous one. Do not assume that everyone with ADHD is going to struggle with education. So for example, like I just said, my school life was very challenging behaviourally and academically. So that's one case of ADHD, but I was undiagnosed, so there's a difference there also. But I also know other people with ADHD that were super academic, really coped well under, the school environment, whereas I didn't. So ADHD, like I just said, comes in many forms. So don't just stereotype it as the one type of ADHD you might know, or you might have, witnessed, or you might have experience with, because everyone has their own challenges. Everyone has their own kind of type of ADHD. So the next one is a personal issue of mine, and that is, I have trouble with friendships. So you should not assume that everyone with ADHD is going to have trouble maintaining a friendship. So for me, friendships it's basically like a Rubik's Cube for me. I can't even solve that, a Rubik's Cube. So I have absolutely no chance on a friendship. So yeah, friendships are very, very difficult to me, but I also know a lot of people with ADHD that are super social, that have loads of friends, that thrive in social situations with friends in groups. Whereas I also know a lot of people that don't. So again, you shouldn't assume that everyone's going to be in the same bracket. Some ADHDers are introverts, some are extroverts, some really do like social situations, festivals, going on holiday. Some people don't, and that's okay. That is fine. The next one, again, is very personal to me, and that is, not everyone with ADHD is going to struggle with employment. I do. I've spoken about it before. Employment is something I desperately, really badly need help solving. I struggle so bad with employment, with attendance, being able to stay on top of tasks, wanting to be motivated to go to work. It's not that I'm lazy, but some days I feel like I just can't get out of bed, and that I just can't face work. It's very, very hard for me to explain, but I struggle with employment. But on the other hand, I know people who need to work, who need to be out actively doing something. So again, ADHD, it's not like a one size fits all. It affects everyone differently. So the next one is, you shouldn't assume that everyone with ADHD is going to struggle with organisation and procrastination and stuff like that, because it doesn't, you just shouldn't. Some people thrive with routine and having, you know, things organised. On the other hand, I don't like things organised. I forget where I put it, but if I leave it where I want to leave it, like on the floor or on the table, then I know where it is. So some people like things organised, some people don't. It's a personal preference, so you shouldn't assume that everyone's going to be like me and be untidy and unorganised and running late all the time. It just doesn't work like that. So yeah, there is another side to ADHD. So the last one is something that I've heard a lot of people kind of throw out there, and I think it's really important to address it. So a lot of people will assume, because we are very impulsive people, again, not everyone, but the majority of people with ADHD do struggle with, you know, the impulsive parts, and that can lead to like relationship issues with like cheating, getting bored easily and stuff like that. And a lot of people just assume that we're going to be bad partners, that we're going to be bad girlfriends, bad boyfriends, bad partners, because we sometimes do get bored. And yes, there are people out there that would go and seek, you know, cheating. They would go out and do that, but that isn't everyone. You shouldn't assume that everyone is going to be like that. Not everyone is going to have trouble communicating, letting someone know, their partner know how they're feeling. Not everyone is like that, so please don't tar everyone with the same brush. It doesn't work like that. So you need to be super careful when it comes to just assuming about someone's ADHD. Why don't you sit down, chat with them, find out what they find hard, find out how you can help. Don't just assume, oh, they're not trustworthy because they're always going to turn up late. No, that person could be really, really, you know, beneficial to you, and they could be a real good, like, person that's on time, organised, whereas you're just tarring them with the same brush. You're not giving them the opportunity because you're assuming that they're going to be, I don't know, unreliable, because you've heard that ADHDers can have trouble time managing. Don't do that. Just ask, communicate, and I promise you, you will get the best version of that person. It's honestly, you're missing out if you just assume that everyone with ADHD is going to be failure, or they're going to be untrustworthy, unreliable. Don't listen to everything that you see on the news, or I don't know, is ADHD ever even on the news? Probably not, but like, don't listen to basic bullshit online that you see about ADHD and it not being true, or not impacting someone's life as much as we make it out to be. Because honestly, if you don't have it, you don't know. Try walk a mile in my shoes, and trust me, I've got an addiction with shoes, and I have a lot of shoes that you can try walking in, because trust me, every day is different. So take a new pair every day, guys, because yeah, it's hard. So thank you so much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe down below. I will really appreciate that, basically. I do have other social medias. I will link them down below. If you want to go follow me, go ahead. So yeah, thank you. I will see you next time. Bye.